Buttons. Don't you just love buttons? I mean, I have containers upon containers of buttons. But first, before we get started on this week's challenge, my name is Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance, and I'm so happy you're here today. So this is week 15 of our organization challenge. Now, I've gotten mixed up a little bit. I think last week I called it 16 and I don't know. I got them all mixed up, but we are in week 15. We have 10 more weeks to go of this organization challenge. And this week we are going to talk about buttons. Buttons are one of my absolute favorite things in my sewing room. I don't use a ton of them, but I absolutely love them. And I think it's because it brings back memories of my childhood and going through my grandmother's button box, even my mother's button box. It's just one of those things that I just am fascinated by. They're great little gems that we have, and I have some vintage buttons. Actually, I have quite a few vintage buttons. I have buttons on cards. I have new buttons. I just love them. They're so much fun. Another thing that I absolutely love about buttons is that my Aunt Amy many years ago would make brooches out of buttons, and I thought they were the coolest things, especially when I was a teenager. They just are really neat. Actually, they still are neat, but she just would bring together the colors and the textures, and it just made this wonderful piece of art that I cherish to this day. So I have a long history with buttons. What I'm going to do in my new sewing space as I'm redecorating and bringing it all together is I'm going to organize them by color, because I think they are going to make a really beautiful design element. And you know how I love the rainbow, so I'm going to do the rainbow colors. And I found these glass jars yesterday at Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to organize them in these jars, and I will show you that process as I go through the buttons. So let's take a look at that now. I hope you enjoyed seeing me go through all those buttons and organizing them by color. I love, love, love the way they look, and I can't wait to display them in my room eventually when everything is finished. So let's talk about your task for this week. Your task is to bring all your buttons together, kind of like I did, and to organize them in a way that makes sense. Now, you may only have a handful of buttons, and you might want to just put them in one container. You might not have the thousands and thousands that I have, or you may have the thousands and thousands that I have, and maybe consider using them as a design element in your space, because they are really cool, and they do hold a lot of history. So bring them all together, get them organized in a way that makes sense for you. Make sure it's a maintainable system, that if you find a button, say in a drawer, or if you buy a new blouse and it has the extra buttons, that you can put it somewhere and put it away, so it's not kind of sitting around and just being in a junk drawer and you're never able to find it again. And just organize it in a way, again, that makes sense to you. Sort and organize these buttons too. That's your next task. So buttons do break, and buttons sometimes are discolored or something you know you'll never use. It might be time to discard them, and then containerize them, like I said, in a tin or some sort of container like I did here. The next task that I am going to encourage you to do is to share those buttons. I have such fond memories of sitting with a button box and just going through and looking at all the different colors of buttons. I would, sort them by color when I was a kid, just play with them. My cousin and I would find the prettiest button and try to compete, and we just had such a good time. It's hours of fun for a young person to go through buttons, and it seems so simple, but it probably shaped who I am as a sewist, as someone who loves this stuff, and it just has such great fond memories for me. So consider, if you have a young person in your life, not too young because they're choking hazards, but if you have a young person in your life, let them go through the buttons or go through them together, and you might be pleasantly surprised at how much they really love them. The next task I'm going to encourage you to do, and this is something I'm going to do this week, I will show you next week what I come up with. I'm going to make something with my buttons. Now I do the pin cushions. That was one of my very first tutorials way back in September, where I put a button with a shank at the top of the pin cushion and hold it all together. But I'm going to try to maybe, make something else with all my buttons, because they're a lot of fun and they're just so neat, at least in my opinion. They're really neat. Thank you, as always, for joining me for this challenge. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll see you next week as we continue the month of June, where we're talking about findings, meaning zippers, buttons, snaps, ribbons, all of that stuff that we have in our sewing space. Please consider subscribing and make sure you take some time to sew today. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.